And a pleasant good afternoon out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is that guy right there. That is Brian Driscoll. He's the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. He is joining me on our Monday podcast. And today, what we do on Mondays is we are going to talk about the Brian Kelly press conference. We're going to break it down, just kind of react to some of the things that he said. Some interesting things that he said today. Mm-hmm. And then we are going to kind of take a trip around college football and talk about some of the games that were, highlight some of Notre Dame's opponents, things of that nature. Again, just a crazy day of college football.
And it wasn't supposed to be. There was not really that many good matchups. And the couple good matchups that there were, like Notre Dame's game was, kind of an ugly game until Notre Dame just blew Wisconsin off the mat. Arkansas dominated Texas A&M for 4 quarters. It was some of the other games maybe that people didn't anticipate that I thought were the most entertaining.
Sure. And I'm kind of keeping an eye on the chat over here. We're not really talking about Notre Dame and Cincinnati today, but guess what? The next 4 days are all Notre Dame Cincinnati. So I see your questions. I see you guys over there. But today's show is more about the press conference, which will be a little bit Cincinnati, and then but more about Wisconsin, and then college football as a whole, not necessarily Notre Dame. So just so everybody's aware, that's kind of how we do Monday shows. But we will get to it if we can. But anyway, Brian Kelly press conference. Let's talk about some of the things that he brought up. First, let's talk quarterbacks because that's the headline, right? He did bring up quarterback play,
and he was asked about quarterback play a lot. Yeah. First of all, he said, obviously with Jack Cohn, it's sort of what we talked about. Yes, he cleared. Well, I don't know if we talked about the show, but I definitely talked about it yesterday. I don't know. So many people called yesterday.
I know.
So basically, Jack went into the locker room, got X-ray, and everything looked good on the X-ray. That's why they had him come back out and throw to see how he felt, and he couldn't go. Because sometimes an X-ray can be clean, but the pain is there or the structure isn't sound, and you feel it, in your body if you can feel it. I've played with a really bad ankle injury one time. We were actually playing at Chowan College, and it was my first career start. And first quarter, I got my ankle rolled up on bad. I had to come out for 2 plays. And I was like, look, I got enough adrenaline right now where it's structurally sound. Now they taped it up, and I can still drive off of it. Jack's situation was clearly he couldn't drive off of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he may, Brian Kelly said X-rays came back good, but they really aren't going to know, and he alluded to this. They aren't going to know till they get out on the practice field and see how he can handle a practice. He said that if Jack is healthy, he's a starter, and it's how it should be at this point in time. Now,
agreed.
If Jack plays, he's going to have to continue to get better and get back to being the guy that he was the first couple games more than he was, at stretches of the last couple. But he mentioned that Tyler Buchner said he felt good, so there's some optimism that he'll play. But again, same with him. It's going to be about let's see how he feels once they get out on the field this week. He said if Jack can't go, Drew Pine is the starter, and Tyler Buchner would play, which is exactly what we've been saying all summer.
All along.
Tyler Buchner is the change of pace quarterback. Drew Pine is the number 2 quarterback, meaning if something happens to Jack Cohn, Drew Pine's the quarterback.
Right. That's always been the plan.
Right. That's what Brian Kelly – for now. Now, again, end of the season, Tyler may be ready to take over. Who knows? But right now, Drew Pine is the number 2 quarterback.
And I loved everything about the announcers, Gus Johnson and Joe Klatt, I believe. I loved everything about, I'm sorry?
Joel,
excuse me. I loved everything about what they did. Gus Johnson gets me fired up as I'm watching things. I mean, his call of the Tyree, kickoff return was unfreaking believable. The only thing I didn't like is that they kept calling Drew Pine the 3rd-string quarterback. That's it. It's the only thing I didn't like because it was
people in the Notre Dame media call him the 3rd-string quarterback. So,
come on, people. You get the depth chart every week. He's been second on the depth chart every week. We talked about the fact that Tyler Buchner gets a package. I mean, it's so clear as day. But anyway, it doesn't take away from anything that Pine did. He did a great job. But I kind of half expected him to do a great job because I think he's a good quarterback. So, so anyway, that's the only thing I didn't like from that game.
The other thing that he mentioned was he asked about, the sacks and how the quarterback can play a role in the pressures. And I thought he put too much on the quarterback. And again, we have something on the Irish Breakdown message board where we put all 6 snaps, and he talked about how the ball's got to come out quicker, and there are times for that. I didn't feel that was the case Saturday, and you and I talked about this. There was one play where not that the ball's got to come out quicker, but he's got to climb the pocket and go.
Right.
On all the plays where he was sacked, it was pressure either got to him quickly or pressure got late because they were 3rd and long situations, 3rd and goal situations where I'd have to go look at the sacks. I think at least 2 or 3 of them were on 3rd down and 3rd and longs.
Yeah.
That's something that, run the ball better, and you're going to be able to be more effective on 3rd down and throwing the football. So, to me, he talked about how Jack Cohn needs to get the ball out quicker. He needs to be more decisive, and that's something that I agree with Coach Kelly about. I think that was something that made Jack so good in the spring, made him so good in fall camp, made him good in the first game of the year, and even at times on Saturday. I mean, early in the game, if you go back and break it down, Vince, when they were running stuff where there was intermediate to short throws, he was catching that thing and getting it out quick.
Right.
Then the run game starts faltering, and they start getting in 2nd and 10. And, then now all of a sudden you're in 3rd and 15, or
right.
It's, 2nd and 8 because you went for, +2, then you throw and you're getting sacked on 2nd and 8, those type of things. It's still the sacks that are problematic. And yes, there are things Jack needs to do better in there, but it's still going to come down to the offensive line playing better.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be the key. But yes, it's what we talked about yesterday. Coach Kelly kind of alluded to. He didn't say this, but you and I talked about how Jack's not getting the ball out as quick because he is anticipating pressure.
He can't do that.
He can't do that. That's
right.
on him.
We agree with that. We agree. Look, I still think Cohn should be the starter if he's 100% healthy. And I'm, again, seeing the chats over here. Yeah, if he's not 100% healthy, you don't start him. I have no problem with that whatsoever. He needs to be 100% healthy. And we won't know the answer to that until Thursday when we hear the press conference.
Basically,
we hear a source or something.
Can we? I want to elaborate on what you just said, Vince, and what we've been saying, because I think that you and I say something that we understand to be true that maybe we're not explaining correctly. We're talking coaches, and when we talk about 100% healthy as a player, it's not that he feels perfectly fine like he's on the first day of camp. It's about do you have the 100% mobility that you had? You can have full mobility and still be in pain.
Sure.
It's about, is the pain causing so when we say 90%, we're not talking about has no pain. We're talking about, is the pain causing him to be 90% of his mobility?
Right.
That's what we refer to. So when we say healthy, we're not necessarily saying Jack can't feel any pain. If he feels any pain on Saturday, you bench him. That's not what we're saying. We're talking about when that pain becomes a hindrance to you moving at a certain speed. That's what we mean when we talk about a football player being healthy, or 100% healthy or 95% healthy. It's not evaluating the degree to which his body has healed. It's the degree in which he can play through the pain at a certain speed. I just want to make sure that when we say that people understand what we mean by healthy, because he's going to have pain on Saturday. You don't go from not being your ankle being too sore or too much pain to play on this Saturday to all of a sudden you feel no pain a week later. That's not what we're talking about. He will feel pain. It's about, does it prevent him from moving a certain way?
Right.
If he can't move, so when we say if he's not 100% healthy, if he's not moving around the way that he was pre-injury, then you have to go a different direction, especially against a front seven that's not great. They have one great edge rusher, but Notre Dame's made several not great defensive line look great.
Yeah,
that's a concern.
They have, but I will also say, just to play devil's advocate, they've also they've made some pretty good edge rushers not impact the game like they could have. I will say that.
Yeah, but I think at the expense of other things.
That's fair.
Right? So, last week they chipped on George Karlaftis a lot, and they did some things. I think that hurt the offense because, again, they weren't able to get guys out. Saturday they did some things with 2 tight ends and such, and it's not a coincidence that the more they started to go to this big personnel and they started to keep tight ends up more on in pass protection, all of a sudden the pass game's not as good. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Right.
And so I agree with your sentiment that they're doing that, but I don't think it's necessarily a positive,
right? Because
it's taken away. The fact is when you have to do that with your line, it's going to hurt you. But we're going to see how this looks Saturday. You have to, and to me, it's about a balance. finding a balance. And we're all about, you and I are both all about mixing up personnel. And I'm okay going seven man protections at times. It's just, I would like to see, like what we were seeing from Tommy on Saturday. We're seeing a lot of play action. A lot of times play action isn't necessarily about fooling the defense. It is to a degree, but it's also about setting a protection. There are certain protections you have that are play action protections, and that's really what you're looking to do, regardless of how much fooling you get.
Sure.
I would like to see Notre Dame, however, still do some things where they actually do some play actions where maybe it's a deeper play action, where you can, maybe go some pistol and get some downhill and maybe do like a half roll or do a play action and you have Jack Cohn roll. I think those are some things that, number one, can change the launch point. Number two, can protect your quarterback a little bit more. And then number three, give him a little bit more time to go. But, those are things that when Brian Kelly talks about, get the ball out quicker. Yeah, that's one thing, but there's a lot of things that have to get affected. So I don't go down that rabbit hole. We'll talk plenty about that during the week as we break down the game.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about, what happens if so-and-so starts and all. We'll talk about all of that stuff. I promise you. Sparkling Swan, I see you got a comment in there about Pine starting. And if he plays well, do you keep him as your starter, et cetera? Cohn is the starter, right? And I don't, if that's hard to say. I'll throw the question up here just because I brought it up.
That's because it fits what we're talking about. That is a bold take. And honestly, so let's say I think we'd have to determine what we mean by well. Does he complete 62% of his passes for 230 yards and manages the offense and they win 24-20? No, I'm not making a quarterback change.
No.
If Drew comes out and looks like he completes well, remember how Ian Book looked his first start against Wake Forest? If Drew Pine comes out and looks like that, okay. Hey, Jack, let's give your ankle another week to heal. You know what I mean? And then get into the bye week and figure some stuff out. I mean,
sure.
And it also partly includes what made him play well. As a coach, you have to determine, Jack could have done that. Or something, you know what? Like he's giving us okay, so when we didn't going back to 2018, I know you and I were not working together at the time, but people know we've been friends a long time. We talk football all the time.
Yep.
We didn't like how they handled the Brandon Wimbush to Ian Book scenario because basically for 2 games they ran an offense that was designed for Ian Book and it was setting Brandon Wimbush up for failure. Okay, so that was something I didn't like. But when they made the change, the offense was generated towards Ian Book, right? And the thing about that scenario was that you look at like this one, to me, it's on one hand with 2018, the offense just was completely flatlined. And a lot of it had to do with the quarterback's inability to run the offense that they wanted to run. This year, it's a completely different situation, right? Having said that, when you watched Ian Book take over in 2018, clearly the offense was working way better than it had in the previous 3 games, right? I mean, against Wake and it was okay. It looked so much different.
Sure.
And it was noticeable that we didn't like how they got there, but if you were going to run that offense, then Ian Book needed to be your quarterback. And you can see how much better Ian Book ran that offense. So to make a short story long, if you get Drew Pine in there and all of a sudden there's just things that you're able to do that you couldn't do before, and your offense clearly is just clicking more, then you do have to sit down and make those tough decisions. And we're not denying that. And I think you and I both agree. If I speak for you, if I'm speaking for you incorrectly, please correct me. But I think you and I both believe that there's a chance that if Drew Pine starts this weekend, he could look so good that we have to have this conversation. But he'd have to look really good, and the offense would have to move it away where you're like, yeah, we haven't seen that from Jack.
Yeah, and I
consider that, in my opinion.
In the way I see it playing out is if Pine has the kind of game that you're talking about, I think that the offensive line will have taken some massive steps forward. And if they do that, well, what happens if Cone was back there behind a massively improved offensive line. You know what I mean? And I think that all needs to be taken into account.
In my scenario, I wasn't necessarily referring to that.
Because I was reading the question there, and it says Pine starts, O-line plays well.
Yeah.
That's the big one for me. Is I don't know that will be the case. And if it is the case, I think either one of those guys could be successful. Now, Pine is running for his life, but he's still making plays. He's getting outside the pocket, and he's keeping his eyes downfield, and he's finding guys, and he's hitting deep. Then we have that conversation.
Or he's just not getting skittish when the pressure comes. He's getting the ball out quickly. He is doing. I mean, so that's the thing I look at. That's the thing I look at when I say that. I want to address something here real quick. Domer Grizz says the IB article listing the depth chart for Cincinnati did not include a second string left tackle. Is that how it's listed on the depth chart from Notre Dame, or is it a simple oversight? I know we're thin, but dang. No, that's how it's listed on the depth chart because there's an or on the first team.
Right.
So it's Michael Carmody or Tosh Baker. So whoever the other or is would be the second tight end. So I'm not going to repeat on the second one. It's, if it's Michael Carmody or Tosh Baker on the first line, I'm not going to then repeat that on the second line. There's another position where that's the case. So like I have Xavier Watts listed as a second team rover, not Isaiah Pryor, because Isaiah Pryor's up on the first line as an or.
Yeah, right.
Without semi, and they don't list a third offensive tackle. Now we all know it's Joe Alt, right?
Yes, because we saw it on Saturday.
But Joe Alt's also listed as the backup right tackle, so I'm not going to have him listed as the backup left tackle and the backup right tackle.
Because people do teams do that, and it's a little ridiculous. You're just filling it in with the same.
I just want to be clear
guy.
So people understand that that's kind of how it's mentioned. So if there's like an or at a position like that, I at times I won't put that guy on the second team because it's just assuming whoever's not in the game from the first team is that guy. So hopefully that clears that up. But he also talked a lot about the offensive line, Vince, and I'll tell you, he didn't say anything negative about the offensive line. He said, things that you expect the coach that we got to play better and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He made one comment I didn't like at all, but his overall tone was very, very unhappy, and not unhappy at the media for asking about it.
Because we've seen that.
That wasn't it. It really wasn't that. It was more of like yeah, guys, okay, I get it. They're not playing well, right? He mentioned that the right side has been assignment correct. And he said the left side needs to be more consistent and assignment correct like the right side. And I'm like, if they're playing the right side is your standard, this is not going to be a fun year. But I do think I get what he was saying. A lot of the run-throughs have happened on the left side.
True.
But there's been some where Kane Madden's let guys run through as well. And he talked about how Jarrett Patterson's got to kind of bring it all together and stuff like that. But for me, it boils down to at least – and he said, look, coach – he said everybody's got to get better. He said, the quarterback's got to get better. The running backs have got to do better. And then he said, they've done a great job in pass pro and all that. But, receivers but he did say like the coaching the coaches got to get better. And he didn't he said like all of them.
He'll never say individually.
Nor does he necessarily have to.
Right.
If he simply says, hey, look, we got to do a better job of getting these guys prepared to play at a high level and execute at a high level. We all know he's talking about. He doesn't need to say Jeff Quinn's done a crappy job getting these guys where he's got to do better. I don't need him to say that.
It would make everybody in the
it would make all of us happy,
happy.
But it would undermine Jeff Quinn's authority with his players.
Yeah. Right.
He needs to sit there and say, look, this is not – and he kind of talked about the standard and then needing to play to a standard. So there were some things that I said that if Brian Kelly's admitting that publicly, I got to think he's having some very harsh come to Jesus conversations with Jeff Quinn and the offensive staff privately. So that was a positive. I liked that coming out of this press conference too, Vince. And he said Sebo Flemister is going to be back this week. Again, 4 games, and all of a sudden he's miraculously back.
Amazing.
He did. Last thing I want to talk about, he talked about good Justin and Jason Ademiyola have been, which shocker, we all see that. He talked about the penalty that he got against. We
didn't talk about this.
We did not talk about that, and I want to talk about that.
Absolutely.
I want to know your opinion on this, Vince, because I have zero problem with Brian Kelly getting a penalty there.
No,
meaning not the refs flagging him. I mean him taking him.
Yeah,
him doing that.
So yeah,
you were there. So explain people what happened because it doesn't show up on TV.
Right. And I didn't see it happen. So I had to ask the guys around me. I said, what was he so upset about? Well, what happened was Kyle Hamilton was on the ground and he was just getting his butt whooped on the ground by two Wisconsin defenders. And they were kind of, leaning on him and messing with them and trying to take out their best player. I mean, let's be honest. Let's call it what it was. They know who Kyle Hamilton is. He was playing special teams. That's a chance to take some free shots at a guy that you don't normally get an opportunity to take free shots at. And they were taking those free shots. And Brian Kelly came to his defense and he reamed the official about that particular situation. And he basically was saying, how can you let that happen to my guy and not call a penalty? And he got up in the referee's face and they called a penalty on him. I loved it. Absolutely loved it because it shows that Brian Kelly's got his guys back. It shows that he's a player's coach and he's not going to let that happen. And I loved it.
It's like when a basketball official takes a tech.
Exactly.
Like I'm good with it. He had to do. I mean, based on what I was told happened, he 100% needed to get a penalty there. And I saw him going off on the ref, and the ref looked at him and said, "We have to." And it's like you saying, "We have to throw that flag. You came out on the field. We have to." I mean, that's the rule. We have to. That's fine.
Sure, and
whatever.
Fine. Okay.
But I don't think Brian Kelly gave a crap about the flag.
No.
Brian Kelly's like, "Okay, flag me, but then flag those guys too."
Exactly.
Because you're absolutely right. It was happening to Kyle Hamilton for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's their best player. And Wisconsin, I don't want to call Wisconsin a dirty team, but let's just say they border on playing past the whistle a little bit more than they should.
Well, look, that was a dirty play. I mean, that was a dirty situation. I mean, call it what you want. That was dirty. Like, come on, man. Like, you're really going to take advantage of a guy who's on the ground like that? That's terrible. And I don't like that kind of play. I've never coached my players to do that kind of nonsense. I think that's ridiculous. Beat him up in the whistle, between the whistles. But when he's on the ground like that, okay, lay on him, whatever, but don't do that extra stuff.
Brian Kelly's comment today was phenomenal, though. He goes, apparently they felt they needed to throw a flag on me for them not officiating that correctly. He savaged the officials.
I love that.
Press conference
I love it.
Which I thought was awesome. I mean, and to me, like I said, I don't care if he ran to midfield and got a penalty on that. Like, you have to have your players back.
Yes.
You have to.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
And the players see that. And it may be like, hey, you know what? I don't like coach, or maybe we don't agree on things, or because every coach has players that don't like them. But if the kids think that you have their back, they don't care if they like you or not, or if you hang out together away from the field or not. It's like, look, coach has my back. I'm gonna go do what I need to do.
Yep,
that kind of thing can absolutely rally a team, in my opinion. And so I loved that. And when did that happen? Do you remember when that was?
Oh, I don't remember exactly when it was, but it wasn't. It wasn't like when Notre Dame had a commanding lead or anything. I mean, it wasn't towards the end.
Yeah.
It was earlier than that when the game was still, in doubt.
I'd really like to look and see when that happened and the correlation between when that happened, when Notre Dame started beating the crap out of Wisconsin. So I am very curious about that.
Yeah, I gotta try to find it. I'm there's got to be a way to find the penalties, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll look for it while we're talking.
I have this friend of mine who literally calls me every day during the show. And I tell him every day, dude, I do a show from 12:30 to 1:30 every day. And every day he still calls me at like 1 o'clock. And I'm like, come on, man.
I love it. I love it.
So anyway, but yeah, I had no problem with that. I like that he did that. I thought it was great. I thought it was great because, sometimes like a coach can get a penalty. Like, dude, you got to be more disciplined than that. Like if he was just like, if he'd have got the penalty, like just arguing on a non-hold,
right,
or a pass interference that should have been called, all that kind of stuff, then I'd have been like, come on, coach, you got to be more disciplined. But when you're getting a penalty because you got your players' backs, get it. Get two of them if you need
to.
I don't give a crap.
Get
it. Because also the other thing too is it was in between plays, so it wouldn't have been like it had been 1st and 30. If you got two, it just meant you'd have started 1st and 10 back 30 yards. If that's what it takes to send a message to your team and the opponents that, hey, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway, I dug it. I dug it. I would have loved to have had a coach that did that. Like, I'm getting late hit, I'm getting cheap shotted, and he's willing to take a 15-yard penalty to have my back. I'd have been all about that. So anyway, but that's about it from today's podcast or press conference with Brian Kelly.
I did find it, I believe. Okay. It was in the fourth quarter. It was on a fourth down, so it was on a change of possession, obviously, because it was a punt situation, right? Trying to figure out where. Okay, so it was, let's see, Pine pass. So it was after the Pine touchdown to Austin. That's
so
when
24-13, basically.
Correct. Yes. And so it was before the Door field goal, the 37-yard field goal. So again, the game was still in doubt at that point. I mean, so
sort of, yeah. I mean, 11-point game with I think there's about 7 or 8 minutes left at least at that point in time.
Yes.
Plenty enough time to get two possessions together.
Absolutely. Yep. So yeah, it was I loved it. And I don't even care when it happened in the game. But
the only thing I meant was,
did it fire everybody up?
Yes, that's kind of what I was thinking about.
After that, they had a field goal and two.
The defense certainly played inspired the rest of the way.
Yeah, right. It happened with 5 minutes and 20 seconds left.
Yeah. So, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So anyway, but yeah.